The Unsolved Disappearance of Flight MH370, voiceover script, read naturally, with quiet pauses and room for emotion. They were ordinary travelers on an ordinary night. A businessman with a last-minute email, a student tired and returning home, a mother, watching the cabin ceiling as she soothed her child. Two pilots who had flown this route many times. At 0041 local time on March 8, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 pushed back from Gate C-17 in Kuala Lumpur and eased into the humid night. The Boeing 777 carrying 239 people bound for Beijing lifted and climbed toward a routine sunrise thousands of kilometers away. The cabin lights dimmed, passengers dozed. Stewards checked overhead bins, folded newspaper corners, planned tomorrow's coffee. And then after a quiet radio call with air traffic control, the world began to move differently. 40 minutes after takeoff, routine contact faded. Radar picked up a different picture. A machine that was supposed to trace one path suddenly traced another. Primary military radar tracked the aircraft as it turned away from its filed route, crossing the Malay Peninsula and heading west, toward oceans that have swallowed other mysteries for centuries. For years, that act, the unbidden turn, the vanishing from civil radar, the last faint signals to a satellite an hour after the last voice, has filled rooms of grief and rooms of investigation. It left behind grieving families, baffled investigators, and a question that has refused to be answered. Where did MH370 go, and why did it go there? The first weeks were an impossible scramble. Ships, aircraft, navies, private companies, and nations converged on the southern Indian Ocean in a search as massive as any in history. The ocean, for its part, remained indifferent. Days became months. Days of black water and salt and technology that often felt small against the sea's breadth. And then something washed up. A single object on a faraway beach. In July 2015, a piece of aircraft debris was found on the shore of Reunion Island, thousands of kilometers from where the aircraft's last known signal suggested it might have ended. Experts examined the part and found serial numbers and markings that linked it, with increasing certainty, to the missing Boeing. That fragment, the flaperon, was proof that something from MH370 had finally made landfall. It was proof, but not the proof people had hoped for. Debris can travel on currents and years of ocean motion. It could confirm only that at least some wreckage had reached far shores. It could not tell us the full story of how the airplane ended up where it did not belong. After the flaperon, other items appeared on beaches across the western Indian Ocean and East African coast. Pieces of composite, panels worn by salt and sun, objects that investigators painstakingly cataloged and analyzed. Each discovery was a small victory and a reminder of the larger absence. The aircraft itself, the central question, remained out of sight, out of reach. In response, governments organized the largest underwater search in aviation history. Planes combed the ocean surface. Autonomous vehicles mapped the seafloor. Sonar painted ghostly, grainy pictures of the deep. For 3 years, teams from many nations scanned an assigned area the size of a small country. Using the best sensors and models that science could provide, they examined wreckage fields, ruled out contacts, and re-examined their assumptions. The official searches, led in the operational phase by Australia's maritime safety investigators and supported by experts worldwide, produced meticulous reports and models, ocean drift studies, satellite ping analyses, and seafloor bathymetry. The picture that emerged suggested that if MH370 had crashed into the southern Indian Ocean, the wreckage would have rested in waters profoundly remote and deeply unfriendly to discovery. The search found no definitive wreckage on the ocean floor. The official conclusion, frankly, was one investigators had dreaded. Without the main wreckage, the reasons the flight diverted and disappeared could not be established with certainty. That reality, the inability to answer the most basic questions, is hard to hold. People prefer narratives. We want who, how, why. But some puzzles resist tidy stories. Sometimes a set of facts leads in multiple directions. In the case of MH370, investigators sifted through phone records, maintenance logs, radar returns, satellite communications, and the biographies of everyone on board. They analyzed possibilities that range from mechanical failure to deliberate acts, to an event so improbable it becomes almost impossible to prove or to disprove. Among the most telling clues are the satellite handshakes, brief electronic pings between the aircraft's SATCOM system and a geostationary satellite. They did not carry messages, but they did provide a timeline, a heartbeat of sorts. Analysts could use those pings to define broad arcs across which the aircraft might have flown. One arc to the north, another to the south. When combined with radar sightings, lack of communications, and fuel endurance calculations, the evidence pointed most plausibly to a southern track into the remote southern Indian Ocean. This is not an elegant signature. It is a technical breadcrumb trail. Imperfect, complicated, but enough to guide loved ones, governments, and searchers into a long, expensive, and ultimately inconclusive hunt. Beyond the floating fragments and satellite pings, there are smaller human tales that anchor the story to the world. Families who rented cars and flew to search sites. Journalists who told the same questions in different languages. Volunteers who scoured beaches in heat, looking for fiberglass and hope. Cabin baggage lists became talismans. Names on manifestos became anchors in living rooms. For those who lost someone, each rumor, a new alleged sighting, a leaked memo, a private investigator's claim, is not just news. It is a flicker of possibility, often followed by the cold ash of disappointment. Investigations have also dug into the aircraft itself. The Boeing 737 is widely regarded as a reliable long-haul aircraft, but reliability does not make it immune to catastrophic failure. Engines can flame out, instruments can fail. Yet the pattern of the flight, sudden disappearance from civilian radar, continued motion on military radar, final satellite pings hours later, did not match any easily understood mechanical meltdown. And so theories multiplied. Some researchers proposed that human action, either by a person on board or someone with access on the ground, altered the flight's path. Others looked for technical explanations. Electromagnetic interference, software anomalies, wiring failures, catastrophic decompression. There are, for each theory, experts who find elements that fit, and other experts who say those elements cannot alone explain the totality of the events. This is the excruciating space MH370 occupies, probabilities without certainty. It is the place where science and human fallibility meet, and where grief insists on answers that data cannot always deliver. Over the years, governments and independent teams released reports that tried to be candid about the limits of what could be known. The official Malaysian safety investigation, international working groups, and the Australian-led search efforts documented methods, timelines, and the gaps in the record. The tone of these documents is sober. They present a chain of evidence, point to likely scenarios, and stress the difference between possibility and proof. They also make a quiet recommendation: keep looking, because until the main wreckage is found, many questions remain permanently open. Sometimes the sea yields small answers. In 2015 and 2016, several pieces of debris found on beaches in places as remote as Mozambique and Madagascar bore markings consistent with components from a Boeing 777. Each piece was examined for paint, serial numbers, and material composition. For the engineers and forensic teams, these fragments were freighted with technical information: where a part might have originated on the aircraft, how salt water had eroded its edges, what ocean currents could explain the journey. To families, those pieces became both relief and torment, proof that their loved one's aircraft suffered some end, but refusing to reveal the larger story. And yet, even as years passed, the will to find answers flickered back to life. New techniques in oceanography, improved models of how debris drifts, and advances in sonar mapping created reasons to hope. In late 2024, the Malaysian government agreed to work with a private exploration company on a renewed search proposal, a no-find, no-fee offer to scan large areas of the seabed informed by refined analyses. For families, for investigators, that pledge was not just a contract. It was a promise that this story, unfinished for more than a decade, might still reach some form of closure. The renewed search planned to search thousands of square kilometers of seabed, using the latest autonomous technologies and updated drift models, guided by fresh assessments. There is another human truth in the MH370 story: how it changed the way we think about modern flight. The disappearance exposed limits in international coordination, in data retention, and in the way safety systems are architected. It led to questions that were technical and profoundly moral. Should aircraft transmit exact positions more frequently? Should more data be stored on board? How should satellite communications be designed to give investigators more robust clues? These are not abstract queries. They have been the subject of regulatory proposals, industry conversations, and design changes that aim to make the next flight less mysterious if it too faces extraordinary circumstances. The lives lost on MH370 are not statistics. They were parents, siblings, lovers, dreamers, and commuters. The rooms they left behind contain small everyday objects that become monuments. A child's drawing tacked on a refrigerator, a passport laid carefully on a dresser, shoes by a doorway that never felt the weight they had known. For the families, the end of the official search was not an end to grief, it was a recalibration. Many continue to press for searches and information. Some pursue legal avenues, others try to build memorials. Their persistence is a testament to the human need for narrative, to close a circle if only to make peace with a memory. There are finally lessons in the silence. Mystery forces humility. It reminds us that even in an era of satellites, fiber optics, and real-time global positioning, the world can still hold secrets. The ocean is not merely water, it is time and memory and geology. The sky does not always keep the stories we ask of it, and people who once trusted that technology would always tell the truth about a flight learned, painfully, that technology can only tell us what it recorded, and only if we know how to listen. If a final act of closure ever comes, it will be because an object is found, examined, and matched, because seafloor pictures illuminate a debris field beyond reasonable doubt, or because data hitherto overlooked is reinterpreted with new tools. Until then, MH370 will remain a question mark in aviation history, and a grief that belongs to families and a strange global community that watched day by day as hope and despair braided together. What does it mean to live with a question this large? Perhaps it means living in a way that honors the absent. Perhaps it means continuing to press for better systems, for better records, for a future in which a vanished flight leaves fewer shadows. For the relatives, the investigators, and the strangers who watched, the story of MH370 is a call to continue the search, not only across oceans, but across the edges of our patience, our technology, and our compassion. Tonight, when the engines slow and the cabin lights dim on your next flight, remember the faces on MH370's manifest. Remember the ordinary fragility of extraordinary systems. Remember that behind every technological map, behind every arc on a satellite log, there are human lives tied to outcomes we still do not fully understand. There are still people searching, still people listening for the smallest ping that could change everything. And until the sea yields what it keeps, the disappearance of MH370 will remain both an unsolved mystery and a quiet moral demand. To keep looking, to keep asking, and to never let those names be reduced to a footnote in history.